The reason I got interested in that is I was studying nutrition in populations all around the world. And I saw the wide difference in cancer, but same thing with heart disease, same thing with osteoporosis, same thing with... The differences are so wide, I'm thinking, why aren't they studying the nutrition part?
We are back with the Everything's Energy Show, and I have a question for you guys. Have you ever thought about the words healthcare and applied it to the medical system and thought, maybe healthcare is really more of an illness management scenario? Well, my guest today has the same belief, but he has a much greater knowledge about it than any of us do. And today I want to welcome Dr. Terry Shintani. Thank you. You are a doctor, a lawyer, a living treasure of Hawaii, a nutritionist, and the most surprising of all, a social media sensation. So Dr. Terry, thank you so much for being here today. How are you?
I'm doing good.
I have a question for someone of your caliber or status of achievement, because not many people get to that level of professional accreditation. What drove that desire to be such an accredited professional in you? Like, what was the story behind that?
Yeah, so what made me go into medicine was when I was 6 months old. My dad was only 37, and he was diagnosed with cancer. Now, this is back in 1951. In those days, nobody survived cancer. I mean, it was basically a death sentence. So when I was about 3, I started realizing that my dad was ill. He was doing number 2 out of the side of his stomach. He had a permanent colostomy, and he had to go in for another surgery. So I asked my mom, said, "So Mom, they're going to cure him now, right?" And she goes, "No, there's no cure." And I'm thinking in my head, my 3-year-old head, the doctors are supposed to cure. How come they can't cure this? And Mom said, all we can do is pray. And pray I did. Every night I would pray, "Dear Lord, don't let Dad die of cancer." And he didn't die of cancer. He lived another 40-something years. Wow. And so to this day, I will always believe in the healing power of prayer. You cannot convince me otherwise, because my dad wasn't supposed to live that long, and he did. And
that experience also probably drove your desire to be a medical professional.
Right. And then it drove me to say, well, why can't they cure cancer? And so in the back of my head, just said, maybe one day I'll become a doctor and help figure this out. And so that really was a driving force in my pursuit of my career. So,
and what a career it's been. Yeah. So as a physician and a legal professional and a nutritionist, how have you evolved your own philosophy of healthcare in terms of dealing with people?
That's kind of an interesting, long story, too. The reality is, when I went to law school, because two things. Well, number one, I didn't have my grades weren't very good in those days. In my early college career, so I didn't think I could make it into medical school. I could make it into law school. I thought maybe I could change things. I'm an old hippie peace advocate, so I thought truth, justice, and the American way. So I went into law. And I didn't think I could stand going to school for another 7 years, because, medical school is 4 years, but then you have residency training. Mm-hmm. So I didn't think I could wait that long. But when I went into law, I hated it. I didn't like what I had to do. The cases are long. If you look at any law book, it's boring. There's no pictures. The words are long.
A little dry, you'd say.
And I wasn't doing very well. And so a friend of mine said, "What are you eating?" And I was eating junk food like any other college kid. And I said, "Well, what does that have to do with anything?" He said, "Maybe that's why you feel tired, and that's why maybe you're not happy with what you're doing." And I'm thinking, what is he talking about? And so he said, "Let me show you." So he introduced me to macrobiotics. A lot of people in those days were interested in macrobiotics, which is balancing yin and yang, and it's all natural whole food.
Mm-hmm.
And my goodness, I started feeling better. And all of a sudden, I wasn't a mediocre student anymore. All of a sudden, my brain woke up, and this was like an enlightenment that changing your diet could change your brain, not just change your health, but change your brain and your energy. My energy was astronomical. I mean, it went from being tired all the time to having lots of energy, even to a point where I could sleep 5 hours, get up, and just jump right out of bed, and no fatigue at all. And because of that, I started excelling in law, even though I didn't like it. And I said, oh, maybe I'll quit law, and maybe I'm now smart enough to go into medicine, because now I'm getting A's instead of my mediocre grades before. Because you see, now not only was I healthier, my brain was waking up, but I was a better student. Well, what I didn't expect was that my spiritual side woke up.
From the diet change?
It seems to be like the diet change. And all of a sudden, I started having out-of-body experiences. I mean, I would see things, but I would be asleep. And I'm asleep, but all of a sudden, my brain is awake, but my body is asleep. And I wanted an explanation for what was going on, because all of a sudden I started realizing there's a spiritual world out there, besides our physical world. And the founder of American Macrobiotics, Michio Kushi, came to Hawaii. I'm from Hawaii, of course. And I asked him what was going on. I went on the macrobiotic diet that he was recommending, and now I'm having spiritual experiences. And he gave this knowing grin, and he said, well, you're resonating with the energy of the universe. You're resonating with the frequency. And he said, it's like, when you're eating cleanly, you can tune in to the resonance of the universe more clearly. And he says, like the book of Daniel. And this is in the Bible, where in the book of Daniel, for 10 days, he ate basically a plant-based diet. And in the Bible, I'm making a short synopsis of it. Apparently, the king found him 10 times smarter than all his other advisors. And in the end, Daniel, in the book of Daniel, was able to interpret the dreams of the king. And now I'm having this kind of situation where I'm having visions. And it wasn't a vision of me being a lawyer. It was visions of me being a doctor. And so now I have this spiritual, now I have the energy, now I have this spiritual connection. And I was going to quit, and then my father's friend, who was a judge, my dad had him talk to him for advice, and he said, no, don't quit. He said, just do well, excel in law school, and that's your ticket into med school, because if you quit now, they'll think you're a quitter. So I studied law very diligently, even though I'm starting to have these dreams about being a doctor. And I made law review, and because I did well in law school, I was a good candidate for medicine. So that's the long story. The story goes longer than that, but
I love that you brought in the spiritual aspect, because I have something I absolutely want to ask you about that, but I think I need to ask this question first. So being a medical professional, in your assessment, and you've been doing this for a few years, so you have a pretty good opinion of things.
Right.
What do you think's wrong with the medical system as we have it now?
Well, they call it healthcare, but it's not healthcare. It's disease care. The big problem is basically the healthcare system doesn't do anything until you get sick, and then when you get when you get sick, then they treat the symptoms and they don't get at the cause. Well, in the U.S. right now, and I can say this because I'm a doctor and I treat patients, probably 70-80% of the diseases we treat are nutrition related. Diabetes, heart disease, cancer, arthritis, autoimmune, all of these have connections to nutrition. And we only got 3 clock hours of nutrition in medical school.
3 hours of nutrition.
3 clock hours, not semester hours.
Clock hours.
Clock hours.
Meaning you learn it from noon till 3 p.m.
Right, yeah, you got it exactly. And I just said, what in the world is going on with this? Because clearly, well, I had a leaning toward interested in diet because I had tried a macrobiotic, basically a plant-based diet. And basically that's what got me into medical school, to do well in law school and medical school. And so that's why I got my master's degree in nutrition after medical school, because I thought it was so inadequate. This is the experience that I will always remember. In 4th year of medical school, you sit with a preceptor. You start seeing patients. You don't do classroom work anymore. You sit with a preceptor, and you see patients with a licensed doctor who's the professor. And so I'm sitting there, and this patient has heart disease, and he has diabetes, and he has high blood pressure, diabetes, all the typical illnesses that America suffers from. And then the doctor leaves the room and leaves me to finish. He tells me what to write for the prescription, and he leaves the room to set up the next patient while I counsel this patient. And I say, like most doctors, I say, well, you take this 3 times a day, you take this with food, you take this in the morning. And I'm going down his list of medications. And he asked me a very fair question. He says, Doc, so when will these pills cure me? And I had to say, well, you have to be on it the rest of your life. And then it started hitting me like, wait a minute. If this guy is on it the rest of his life, he's still sick. Because by definition, if he was well, he wouldn't need the medicines. And I kind of realized it before, but it was just a stark reminder that I went into medicine to be a healer, but we weren't doing healing. We were just dealing with the symptoms.
Managing the situation.
Yeah, right. And so that's one of the reasons why I started looking, other than just medication, to treat my patients in a much better way, and not just treat them of their illness, but to keep them well, so they won't have to come back. And I hesitate to say this, but I was a lawyer first, right? And I'm thinking, this is just a question now. Diabetes is a nutrition disease, right? Is it malpractice to treat a nutrition disease without knowing nutrition? Is that a fair question?
Interesting question.
Yeah.
What was your answer to that when you finally sat with that question?
I won't say it in public.
Fair enough. We could infer what that might be. Okay.
Yeah, but anyway, that's the thought process. So most people think I had a master's before I became a doctor. It's the other way around. I got my master's in nutrition after I became a medical doctor.
That was a really nice description of what you think is wrong with the medical system, because I've said it myself. It's you're managing a scenario, and I am not a medical doctor, so I'm a person with an opinion. I'm a health professional, but I can say that seeing my own family and other people have their scenarios managed with pharmaceuticals, there's no root causative aspect to it.
Right.
And people who are using the pharmaceuticals long term, they're also making money for large companies.
And so what I did with that is, when I studied nutrition, I was studying nutrition. You see, what really struck me about nutrition as an intervention, not just prevention now. If you look at, my dad had colon cancer. If you look at population studies, the difference between the mortality of colon cancer in the U.S. is like about 6 times higher than it is in countries like Japan, Thailand, Southeast Asia. Mm-hmm. There's a 6-fold difference. It's not 60%, it's 600%.
Yeah, that's massive.
And it's clearly correlated with diet. It's almost a straight line. You could do a great regression line. Mm-hmm. It's a straight line. It's a straight line. Those who eat more fat and meat had more cancer. Those who ate less fat and meat and more. I mean, if you look at population studies, you presume that in Thailand they're eating rice and vegetables and maybe small amounts of meat. Mm-hmm. And my question was, if there's a 600% difference, why aren't they using nutrition to prevent the cancer? And of course, the reason is there's no money in it. I mean, unfortunately, I think that would be a reasonable conclusion.
I would also probably add to that a doctor could say it's outside of their scope of practice to focus on nutrition as a modality.
Well, isn't that an oxymoron?
Of course it is.
Outside the scope of practice. I mean,
well, it's the diagnosis and treatment of disease with pharmacological interventions.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that seems to be, but that seems to be
it's a cop-out.
Well, yeah. I mean, kind of a de facto way that they're actually practicing. But that's why I did what I did.
Interesting.
And interestingly enough, people would come to me and I would put them on a good diet and they would get well.
You also have, from what I'm told, interesting philosophies on diet that relates to ethnicity or cultural background, for example.
Well, yeah, the cultural part is, I don't think it's so clear that the cultural aspects are, how do I put it? Other factors in good health. Like in Japan, they have ikigai, which is purpose of living. Mm-hmm. That helps with longevity. And then you have, how much people exercise, all of those other things.
Japan, they have one too, where you only eat till 80% full, right? You don't gorge yourself like you do in the West.
Yeah, that one drives me nuts. Because I have, I'm a third generation American Japanese ancestry, but it drives me nuts when I think they say harahachibu. Mm-hmm. It's not harahachibu. It's a harahachibun. B-O-N.
Okay.
But they spell it with B-U, and it drives me nuts when they...
Does that mean something totally different to the uneducated?
They speak of this, they're experts on this, and I said, this is not even their culture, and they don't even know how to say it, and they're pretending they're experts. But it's boon, B-U, with an N at the end.
For those who practice that or say that phrase, now you know.
But eating to 80%, these are the kind of things. But what I did do was, in the 1990s, what I was famous for was I put Native Hawaiians on the ancient Native Hawaiian diet.
What does that consist of?
The reason I got interested in that is I was studying nutrition in populations all around the world. And I saw the wide difference in cancer, but same thing with heart disease, same thing with osteoporosis, same thing with... The differences are so wide, I'm thinking, why aren't they studying the nutrition part? So now getting back to the Hawaiian diet, if you look at, Native Hawaiians, there was a study at NIH on ethnicity and obesity. And it seemed Polynesians, native Hawaiians and someone, have the highest problem with body mass index, obesity. So I said, well, as a nutritionist, I look at what they used to eat. It was taro, it was sweet potato, it was poi, it was vegetables, it was seaweed, it was a little bit of fish, but not, and once in a while they'd have chicken. Mm-hmm. But you see, the animal products part had to be very small. Why? There's no refrigeration. Throughout history, the animal product portion of the traditional Hawaiian diet, it was there, but it had to be small, like it had to be in virtually any culture, because there's no refrigeration, and so you can't, if you're going to eat chicken, you got to slaughter it that day and eat it that day. Mm. Fish, you catch it, you got to eat it that day, or maybe the next day, and otherwise it'll spoil. So most of the diet was in Hawaii was taro, poi, sweet potato, basically plant-based. And of course, they had plentiful fruit, for example. And when you look at pictures of Hawaiians in those days, they were all slim. So how did a slim, athletic, I mean, they're big and strong, but they weren't overweight like they are today. So how did that happen? And you have to start thinking, well, maybe the diet changed. And of course, that's clearly the answer. So if the diet can make them so overweight today, then going back to the old way should make them slim again. And it's almost like there's this whole term called cultural genocide. The culture changed. When a culture gets colonized, and then the colonial power starts introducing white bread and sugar and those kinds of foods that are not native to that indigenous area. Things will change, and so that's really what was happening. So the question was, so when you have cultural genocide, you destroy the cultural way of eating, and then their health starts to go down. Well, what happens if you restore the cultural way of eating? Then their health should return, and that's exactly what I proved in my project. I put Native Hawaiians back on eating only what they did pre-Western contact back in the I guess it was back in the 1700s, and it was a 21-day project. In 21 days, I mean, and it was ad lib meaning there was no calorie restriction. Mm-hmm. I just let them eat as much of this. They all lost weight, and they started looking like they did.
21 days isn't a long time either.
No, it's not. And the average, I think the average weight was up. I don't have the specific numbers in mind, but the average weight of the person on our project was 248 pounds, somewhere around that. Average weight loss was 17 pounds with no calorie restriction. Yeah. So we started to prove our point. And by the way, in the meanwhile, I'm taking people off their insulin. And by the way, don't do that without supervision, without the supervision of a doctor. And I'm talking about type 2 diabetes, not type 1. You can't do that with type 1 diabetes. But blood pressure was coming down. And because of that, we actually won a national award. Our project won the highest national award at the National Institutes of Health, because we started with some of the worst health statistics, and we ended with some of the best, the biggest improvements, and we did it without any artificial intervention. We just put people back, just made common sense. We put people back on their ancient diet, and they got well again.
Imagine that. You focus on nutrition, heal the body.
Yep.
Do you think that pattern would work for someone of multiple different ethnicities?
Oh
Meaning
yeah,
someone's-
I don't think the ethnicity is that important because you look at the Okinawans; they live the longest, you know. But the diet is not that different from the Hawaiian. They ate sweet potato and they didn't eat poi, but they ate lots of vegetables and very small amounts of animal product. And if you look around the world, most of the cultures that live long, like in the Mediterranean, for example, their animal product intake is very small. They do eat whole grains, and in the Pacific Islands, they eat sweet potato and yams and that kind of thing. You know, so many people are against carbs.
Well, that was a fad that I think is starting to pass us by in some capacities now.
But the point is, they need to differentiate between a processed carb, which is what we eat in the U.S. Most of the carbs are eaten as white bread or white flour products, or sugared drinks. But the carbs that were eaten by the Hawaiians and the Okinawans and the Mediterranean people, they're all whole unprocessed carbs, and those are the ones that really help improve people's health.
They have all the micronutrients. They have the fibers intact.
Fiber, the B complex.
Yeah.
You don't want to argue with nature.
Yeah, nature doesn't make a mistake. It just refines things over time.
Right, exactly. Yeah,
that's one thing. I studied holistic nutrition, and then you start to realize the patterns, right? As you said, with nutrition, it's or carbs specifically. Carbs are not the problem. It's the food plus the person's physiology. So what it sounds like you did was you fixed the food problem, and then you monitored the physiology and worked on supporting the physiology's regression back to a place of no longer having issues with handling glucose, which is really what type 2 diabetes is. It's an energy problem.
That's right. Yeah. So anyway, that's kind of my background with, and by the way, while I recommend exercise as well, in this project we added no exercise. So they cannot attribute the weight loss to increase in exercise. It was all the change in the diet.
Which is the best kind of study because you're just focusing on one variable.
I tried to focus on one main factor.
I want to segue, if I may.
Yeah.
Because you mentioned something at the very beginning, and I said there was another question I wanted to ask you.
Right.
You mentioned having a very strong spiritual belief.
Mm-hmm.
And you have actually done some studies on the energy enhancement system and have a very familiar background with energy medicine in general.
Right.
Why do you believe the medical system doesn't include spirituality or understanding of things that are not chemical?
I think part of it is it's hard to measure. You know, how do you measure spirituality? How do I verify that I had this spiritual experience, this spiritual vision? You know, it's not quantifiable.
It's purely subjective.
I think that's part of it, and it's something you'd have to experience. That's the only way I can. I mean, people can describe it, but I think not enough. What's the word for it? Leaders in the field have had that kind of experience.
Mm-hmm. Something that connects you to a knowing that there's something bigger than you in this world,
like
this universe.
You know, sometimes I put it this way. I said, you know, I have faith in God. And some people say, well, faith is belief without evidence. That's what some people describe it as. And for me, I said, well, it's belief with evidence, because I've had the evidence for myself. I can't say that for anyone else, but that's my knowing, is that I've had that experience.
I think that's also a hard thing when it comes to healthcare, when you look at the individual versus looking at a population, right? Because Dr. Terry's world is entirely Dr. Terry's world, as you experience it in your body, where mind is mind, and also the permutations of how maybe a pathology develops or a lifestyle stress can dovetail into something as an illness.
Well, it reminds me that, I have a social media presence. It's drshintani.com, I think.
Yeah, I want to talk about that later, because you're like a bit of a TikTok sensation.
But periodically I will do prayers online as part of my, mostly I'm talking about health and nutrition advice. But when there's an important event, for example, World Peace Day for the United Nations, for example, my reel for that day will be, I'll ask people to pray with me for world peace. And I'm laughing because I'm going to say something that made people laugh. So I did the prayer. That was like September 21st, and latter part of September. And I said, if you feel the Spirit, pray with me, and in the comments, tell us where you're praying from. And so we did, and I had something like 15,000 people pray with me for world peace, and we prayed for end of war and release of hostages, including Gaza, Ukraine, and all. And so I had about 15,000 prayers from like 31 countries. It was really exciting that many people are believe. I mean, they believe in the Spirit, right? There. And so the funny thing was, one of my prayer partners in Africa, and it's all around the world, by the way. One of my prayer partners in Africa says, "Did you see that?" I said, "What?" He said, "Our prayer worked." I said, "Why?" He said, "We prayed for peace in Gaza, and there's now peace in Gaza. We prayed for the release of the hostages, and they released the hostages." And he was saying, it was our prayers that did it.
And that is such a perfect example of no evidence in terms of the efficacy,
Right.
but the outcome is the outcome.
Yeah.
It's said that when you have enough people gathering together, tuning into a common frequency, it can really shift how the third dimensional reality
that's right. Exactly.
and the events in it unfold.
Yeah.
Is that your belief too?
Yeah, I believe that. I do. Yeah.
Well, you experienced it with your father, and then you've done it multiple times.
And that's why I do the prayers, actually, is I want people with collective intention to make the world a better place, including, like I said, I was an old 1970s peace activist, and I still am, so.
It never dies, right?
Yeah.
Well, that's probably a very an appropriate way where you collided with Dr. Sandra Rose Michael and the energy enhancement technology, because from what I understand, again, you're looking for evidence as a medical professional. You didn't really know what to make of the energy enhancement system at first.
So just to give you a little bit of background, I was the clinical chief of the Department of Alternative Medicine at our medical school. So it was our job to use integrative practices, including nutrition and acupuncture. We had two doctors that were two MDs who were also licensed in acupuncture. We had another MD who was certified in Ayurvedic medicine. We had a holistic pediatrician, and we welcome new technologies, but we're a university. We also demand scientific evidence. We're not going to just try any modality that's out there. We needed some evidence. So people used to come to me with this device or that approach, and I would say, "Do you have peer-reviewed literature supporting what you say from a reputable institution to support what you say?" And most of them don't have it. I mean, if you look at a lot of the alternative medicine or the integrative practices, they don't have it. And so I don't want to, I don't want to put my license on the line for something that doesn't have credibility. And same thing with Dr. Michael. She comes to me, and there's these 4 devices in the corners of the room, and she's claiming that it sets up a scalar energy field and it's a healing field. And I'm open-minded, so I said, do you have peer review? I said, it didn't look like it would do anything. I said, do you have peer-reviewed literature? And she had it. And she said, yeah, this is a study done by scientists at Stanford Medical Center showing that it actually had an effect, and this is a little esoteric, but noradrenaline reuptake. Well, noradrenaline reuptake is the mechanism of an antidepressant. And I think, you mean your device will have the effect of an antidepressant without even taking a pill? And she said, look at the paper, the research. And so I did. I said, well, that's really interesting. So I installed it at our clinic. And people were getting results. So one guy, I remember we started on, and you have to realize this is just an anecdote. This is a case study, if you want to call it that. Guy who had mesothelioma, and one of my patients said, "Oh, can you help this guy?" I'll call him George. I said, "Yeah, sure. Well, let's see." So he comes in, and no, he told me he has mesothelioma, and they say it's incurable. So he comes in with an oxygen tank, and I said, "Oh," and he didn't look good. You know, he looked a little bit gray. And that happens when your oxygen tension goes down, you know. I said, why don't you lie down, you know, instead of you know, sitting in a chair. I said, maybe you should lie down. I said, I can't lie down. I said, why can't you lie down? He said, I can't breathe. Well, in medicine, you know, that's called orthopnea. When you're in orthopnea, you're basically bordering on respiratory failure. And so I sat him up in a chair, and he sat in the chamber for an hour. And I said, well, come back whenever you need. You know, I'm not, you know, I said, let's see how you do. So he would come back, and oddly enough, he would come when I wasn't there, so I didn't know how often he was coming. 3 months later, and by the way, he said that Mayo Clinic had told him he was going to die. Basically, he said, "You're too far gone. Your mesothelioma is all over your both of your lungs. You're not going to make it. You better get your affairs in order." So 3 months later, the friend who referred him called me up and says, "Hey, Doc, what did you do to George?" And I went, "Oh, no, he's in the hospital or something." I said, "Why? What happened?" He said, "He went back to work." I said, "He went back to work?" He said, "He doesn't need his oxygen anymore. He looks great. What did you do?" And all I could tell him was, "Well, we've got this scalar chamber that..." He said, "Well, whatever you're doing, you better keep doing it, you know." And so George lived another like 14 years before he died of something else.
Wow.
Yeah. After Mayo Clinic said he was going to die in 6 months. So that was an anecdote.
But you yourself have also done some research with
well.
the
So
E system,
then what we did was actually let me go back to the science part for a minute. You know, Dr. Michael was saying she's setting up a scalar energy system, and she also had a video of a physicist showing that in the you see, scalar energy doesn't have the same oscillation as a Hertzian. Hertzian energy is vectored. It points one way or another. Mm-hmm. And she showed that the vectors have magnitude and direction. Scalars have no direction. Mm-hmm. It's just present. Like temperature is a scalar quantity. It doesn't point anywhere. But electromagnetism has a north-south, you know, has north pole and a south
poles,
pole.
yes.
Right. So she said it's scalar, so there's no directionality. And this is, again, I'm thinking, well, prove it. And so she has a video of a physicist with an oscilloscope that's flatlining in her system. And that was very surprising to me. And the physicist said this isn't supposed to happen. So this is indeed a scalar energy field. The energy field has to be there because first the law of thermodynamics is that you can't get rid of the energy. So the energy had to be there. It's just not in a Hertzian form. It was in you have to conclude that it was a scalar energy field. So the other case was, which is a case that we published, was a 4.5-year-old girl who was having multiple seizures every day, grand mal seizures, despite all the medication she was on. And the medication was just knocking her out. And we put her in the system, and after 1 hour in the system, her seizures went from 20 seconds long, and she was having multiple 20-second long seizures, went down to 7 seconds. We said, well, that's amazing, you know? And so we kept doing it, and after I can't remember how many sessions, but we gradually got her 20-second seizures down to 1 or 2 second, just basically twitches, and that was it. And we kept a seizure log, so it's just a case study, but I talked to a pediatric neurologist, and he said, this is amazing. You should really try to publish it, because the first time they're showing that this kind of energy field can reduce seizures. So we have an official medical journal publication, peer-reviewed, that shows that the energy enhancement system mitigated seizures in this little girl.
What do you think is the interplay there between the person's physiology and the field? Like, what do you think is happening within the body?
I think, and this is just supposition because we don't have the data, but I think that, and there's a biophysicist that I spoke to said that he believes that cellular energy is increasing. And I think Dr. Michael has some evidence of that. She has a just a slide of brain, what is it, EEG studies showing that after a very short time, I think a 10-minute period, you could see brain energy increasing. Brain voltage, I guess they're looking at millivolts.
Usually accompanied with wave change patterns as well.
Yeah, but there are multiple curves, because each curve is a pair of electrodes. So I think that may be one possible explanation, that you boost cellular energy and then you raise the seizure threshold. I mean, that's the proposed mechanism. I think this kind of thing is for the future of medicine. Right now, number one, it's hard to measure. Number two, it's not a big money making thing. It's you're not going to get a pharmaceutical out of it. So there's not enough studies on it, but I think there should be, because some of the effects we've seen are really surprising.
That's a very good point, because so many people ask in regards to energy technologies, well, how does it work? How do you know what's happening? And I think people who don't have a background in health or medicine don't understand that there's not one thing you can measure to prove the efficacy of an energy field. You have to measure something within the body, get a baseline before and after, and then maybe compare it to a control to see, was there an effect?
Exactly, you got it.
And was the effect positive, negative in terms of the outcome? Because we've done some clinical stuff, and that's in some ways the best that we have, because clinical has the most relevance to someone's practical existence, at least in my opinion. I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
No, yeah, I agree with that. So these kind of things, it's hard to do research on it, and in a lot of ways, our medical system is skewed in favor of pharmaceuticals because they can make money on it, so they do more studies on it. And it's unfortunate. I used to think they should say that for every unnatural intervention, like a pharmaceutical, like a synthetic drug, for example, for every $1 they spend on that, they should spend $1 on natural alternatives in terms of research. But, I mean, you'd have to legislate that, and you'd have to have a budget because, see, the big pharma companies have their budget because they can make it back on the back end and, sell cholesterol medicines for $1 billion.
There's a lot of money in disease. There's not a lot of money in health.
Right. Yeah. Unfortunately. Yeah. But what's good about the energy system is the energy enhancement system is that it's non-invasive. It doesn't require IVs or blood draws or anything like that. All you do is sit in the chamber and take a nap, or if you want to read a book, you can do that. It's just very passive, and it's something very easy to administer.
Yeah, it really is something that's practically executable in one's life. So thank you for sharing all that. That was wonderful because, I mean, you were involved in the early days in Hawaii, and it's amazing as to what it's become relative to the origin stories. I want to ask you a final question to kind of close this interview off. Everything that you've seen in your life, all that we've spoken about, the problems with the medical system, where do you think medicine needs to go to fix itself in the future? What would you like to see happen in your lifetime?
They've got to have more faith in nature. I mean, our food is artificial, our pills are artificial, our interventions are artificial. They really need to. They need to have a. I think that's a very tough question to answer in a short time. But
understandable.
But I think health is. I'm going to say a poem.
Okay.
That I explain in my drshintani.com social media, but everybody liked this. This will make this view this podcast popular. This is what I say: you are what you eat, you are what you drink, you are what you breathe, you are what you think, you are what you do, you are what you say, you are all the love you give, and you are what you pray. So what that means is, well, anyway, I'll elaborate the meanings in my social media reels. But that's kind of what I try to live by. And the reason I'm say that is that all of those things can be done naturally. It doesn't cost much, and I think medicine needs to have more of they need to focus more on wellness than diseaseness, if you want to, or illness.
Yeah, I follow.
And they need to, the system needs to spend more on the front end so they don't have to spend a fortune on the back end. How to get there, I'm not really sure. But I've been working at this for, I finished medical school in '85, so it's been 40 years.
I wasn't alive yet.
Yeah.
Well, Dr. Shintani.
But 40 years I've been slugging it out.
Yeah.
And
clearly you still love doing it, though.
What's exciting is that in the 90s, the big you had to be, the big way you reached a lot of people was being on national TV, right? And I was very fortunate. I was on national TV several times because of my project. I was on Dateline NBC. I was on CBS This Morning, on ABC National Radio, CNN, Fox. I was on I actually had appearances on all of those in the 90s. And I thought, and what's exciting is that my social media is now starting to build up. If I add it up, I've got over 1 million followers, and I hope talking to you is going to get me a few thousand more.
Definitely. I think everyone who enjoyed that which we shared today will obviously want to figure out where to find you. Why don't you tell everyone where to find you so this way they can actually...
So my ID would be drshintani.com, drshintani.com. And that would be Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. I should be there because I have, several hundred posts up. So.
And that's where you share your wisdom and your little, clinical pearls and nuggets.
But what I'm saying is that's kind of the new way of reaching people, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, newspapers and even the main TV, the mainstream media is, what do they call it? Getting democratized. It's that kind of attention is being captured by people like you who have a popular podcast. Mm-hmm. And who's the other guy, Joe Rogan or something like that?
Yeah, we're not quite comparable at this moment, but hopefully in the future. But yeah, podcasts are the new way that people learn, and videos are the new articles, right? People don't want to read anymore; they want to watch something,
right? And they don't want long stuff.
Short form content.
Yeah, and I'm happy to do that, and I guess the reason I'm saying that is that we all have to realize the world is changing, and we got to change with it or get left behind. Yeah. And
I'm hoping in that change, this push for health and wellness becomes a more preventative strategy.
Then the people who are not just money driven will, just regular people like you and me, will have some way to have our approach disseminated, besides just the big pharma or the big companies that have lots of money. If we put out a good product, maybe that's good enough to get people's attention and their interest. So.
You can keep praying for it too, right?
And we should keep praying.
I agree. Thank you so much, Dr. Shintani. Thank you for the wisdom, the knowledge, the stories, everything. And I want to thank everyone for tuning in. If you resonate with this message, please share it with someone who you think will benefit from it. Thank you as always. We'll be back with another amazing episode in the future of the Everything's Energy Show. Until then.